So, how have you been, Rabbi?
ברוך דיין האמת וברוך השם יום יום בכל מצב. God is worthy of praise in every situation. I think it's very important that we remember that the unchanging perfection of our Creator is unaffected, not detracted nor added to by anything that happens in this world. Nothing in this world affects the immutable, the unchanging perfection of our God. We cannot say that these atrocities, these wicked acts, we cannot say that they are wicked without an absolute standard of good. So those who would say that how could there be a God if such evil things happen? Well, how can you say it's evil without there being a God to determine what is right and wrong? Same with the Holocaust. It's easy to understand how people can be frustrated and sad. I feel the sadness as well. No doubt. I was basically, hate to say it, but I was basically paralyzed with sadness to some extent these last 2 weeks. Getting better currently. But my point is that without free will, we're nothing but robots. Without free will, we cannot truly show love, voluntary love. And the cost of free will is that there is the capability, there is the potential for people to do the most atrocious acts imaginable. And certainly that's what we've seen at the beginning of this month. We saw acts that are more atrocious, more grotesque and vile, more perverse than even things that the Nazis did. Yeah, the Nazis, it's hard to compete with the evils of the Nazis in scale. In scale, meaning as far as the extent of the evil, the extent of the murders, it doesn't come close to the Holocaust of the Nazis. But as far as perversity and shamelessness, they exceeded the Nazis, who at least tried to cover up their evils for quite a while. And for all we know, it was not something that they filmed relishing in sadistic sexual perversities with old women, young women, and even babies and boys. This went far beyond the grotesqueness and perversion of the Nazis. It's just at a smaller scale, thank God. But the only way we can make sure that it remains at a smaller scale is if we respond to it appropriately, not by rolling over on our backs and saying, oh, if you come and slaughter us, we're just going to say, please don't slaughter us again while our backs are lifted, while our necks are lifted up toward them, ready to be slain. That is the behavior of a mentally ill individual or someone who wants to be slaughtered. And we have to remember that when the world tells us, ceasefire, constrain yourself, show restraint toward murderers. No, thank you. Sorry for the little tangent. It's hard to control your words when faced with something like that. It's disgusting.
Um, yeah, I totally agree. I'm so sorry. The pain that you go through, it's not easy taken, and it's really, I don't know. I mean, what to say? There's no words to express the pain, the heart. It's too bad. It's too bad. The atrocities are too worst. Um, Unimaginable. As I said, that there's no words. Yeah. So
There, there,
actually,
there are
mhm.
things that they don't even hardly speak about in the news. Not even necessarily because they're trying to hide it, but because there are things that are so gross that they're afraid it will negatively impact their viewership, or there's a standard of there's sort of a code of journalism and public broadcasting. You can't show certain things on TV. In a similar way, there are things that are almost unspeakable that happen, things that are unspeakable.
There are a lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation there, and which is not true. And as usual, in a wartime, it happens always. People give a lot of misinformation to get the sympathy or empathy or whatever. They're trying to achieve their goals. Yeah, it is very hard to find these things, but as you know, that as a overall, it is totally. It's a shame to humanity, like what's happening right now. It's a big shame.
It's a desecration of God's name that they claim to represent. It's a perversion of God's name and of religion. Like you,
Hmm.
you claim to represent Allah and do these kinds of acts in the name of Allah. They need to understand, and all those who support them and sympathize with them, that they are supporting and sympathizing and encouraging blasphemy of the name of Allah. They are blaspheming the reputation of God in this world. Yeah, they are not Jews, but they claim to take upon themselves the reputation of the God of Israel. So yeah, they don't affect God in the reality as he is, but they definitely mar God's name in this world, meaning they give God a bad name in the eyes and the ears and the minds of the masses. They give God a bad name. They give God a bad name among less devout people in the West, secular people in the West, and they give a bad name for God even among people in the Islamic world. Of course, when you live in a world where there's no freedom of speech and you say something, the wrong thing, you might be killed, then a Muslim can't speak out exactly what they think because they don't want to die. But I assure you, there are plenty of Muslims in the Muslim world who are disgusted by this, but there's very few of them who are willing to stick their necks out and show their faces while expressing their disgust. Any decent human being would be disgusted by this. Any decent human being.
Yeah,
If you're not disgusted by this behavior, you're not worthy of living. You're not worthy of living if you're not disgusted by this.
Hmm.
It's disgusting.
Yeah. Yes, I know. Yeah. So, Rabbi, so let's kind of a little bit. I know that this has been there for years and years. I know that Jewish people go through a lot of painful history. Whether they're in the inside the country or outside the country, there is always something against them, like all the time. So these Palestinians and the Hamas, I know that you know more than me. So what is that aim? I mean, like, what is the intention? Intention is to eradicate the Jewish people or to take the whole land. They're interested in taking the land piece or the human piece. Like what they're trying to do.
I'm happy you asked this. I think right off the bat you've touched on perhaps the key element both of their deception and their evil. Both the deception and the evil. And Western governments and other governments, including India, including China, they need to wake up from their naivety. They need to wake up from their gullibility. They're gullible. They're being deceived. The biggest strength that the terrorist organizations that operate under the name Palestine or Palestinian liberation or resistance, their greatest deception is in presenting themselves as simply an innocent, poor victim, indigenous victim, meaning they present themselves as an indigenous population, the local native population of a certain land that has been suffering unjust occupation of a foreign entity. And they portray the Jewish people, the people of Israel, as being the foreigners who are oppressing them. And all they are doing, they are like innocent little David who's just trying to defend himself against the Philistines. They portray themselves this way. They also they also give themselves away in that same analogy. King David against the Philistines. And that's exactly what's going on here, but the roles are reversed. Their greatest deception is in acting like it's just a land dispute. Among themselves, they openly express that it's not a land dispute. Openly in Arabic language when they speak to Jews online, but then when they come on TV in tuxedos after washing the blood of raped babies from their faces and hands, then they come on with a tie and act all professional and say, oh, the Israelis have been killing us and driving us out of our land and we're just resisting. Okay. First thing I want the world to recognize, good hearted individuals in the West and in the East, wherever you are. First thing first, Israel giving a little more land is not going to make peace. We already gave them Gaza in 2005. We, the people of Israel, our government, I did not agree with this, but the government of Israel ethnically cleansed. Palestinians always like to act like they're the victims of ethnic cleansing. The only victims of ethnic cleansing in this whole story are the Jewish people. International pressure, both from Arabs and the West, even the United States, press the Jewish people, our government rather, to ethnically cleanse ourselves from Gaza for the sake of peace. Right? The same way they still pressure us with embargoes and sanctions to ethnically cleanse ourselves from Judea and Samaria, what they deceptively call the West Bank. They want to ethnically. What does ethnically cleanse mean? It means to eradicate a certain ethnicity from an area. And it's usually used specifically in reference to removing the indigenous, the original native population from an area. Well, Jews get their name Jewish from the fact that they originate from Judea. Judea is the earlier name of the region that they like to call West Bank. Okay, same thing with the term Israel, the people of Israel. We are called the people of Israel because we are from the land of Israel that they so called as Palestine. Don't forget this concept. Land for peace will not help. They don't want Gaza. They don't want the West Bank. They never said that they want the West Bank and Gaza. All along, they have said that they want the entirety of it. So, unless you also, in supporting them, unless you also want to destroy the entire nation of Israel, you can forget about the idea of giving land for peace. You can forget about the idea of the Jewish people giving them a little more land in order to gain peace. It's not going to work unless that's what the Palestinians themselves also want, but it's not. You might be able to find one or two Palestinians here or there who like this idea of just having the West Bank to themselves. You are a fool and extremely uninformed if you think that this is what the establishment of the Palestinian people want. A simple way to prove this, don't take my word for it. Simple way to prove this. Look up pretty much any of the mainstream Palestinian organizations on the internet. Look them up and look at their emblem, their symbol, their motto, their logo. In all of these logos, you're not going to see the shape of the map of the West Bank, Judea, which is the heartland of the Jewish people. You're not going to see that. You're not going to see the shape of Gaza. You're going to see the shape of the entirety of the land of Israel. They consistently put this in all their logos and all their emblems. That is what they want, and they don't hide it. They don't hide it. That is why they have rejected all of the many proposals that Israel has made as offers of peace to them. Land for peace. They've rejected all of these. Go ahead.
So one. The question is like, you should have some authenticity or some tangible evidence or something you want to claim your land. You know, instead of killing the people and chasing them out, you know what? This is our authentic records, or these are our evidences that we have. This land belongs to us. So, in what is the base that they're claiming it is their land?
The the strongest evidence that they have for this being their land is basically that the majority of the people who call themselves Palestinians currently are truly descendants of people who lived in what was called the British Mandate of Palestine before the State of Israel was reestablished in 1948. So it is true that the majority of the people who call themselves Palestinians, they were They truly were. It's a fact. They were residents who lived in the area of land that was called the British Mandate of Palestine. Okay. However, they are not all of those who are residents. A large percentage of the Jewish population of the state of Israel are also descendants of people who lived in Palestine and were also called Palestinians at that time.
No, who named them Palestinians?
Okay,
Who
so
named
that's
them?
what I'm getting at. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. And there are multiple layers to there are layers to this. Now, their current claim, the strongest evidences that they give for claiming land there is that they lived there before the state of Israel existed. That's true. But most of the Jewish citizens of the new state of Israel also lived there before the state of Israel existed. And they were also called Palestinians. The Jewish civilians there were also called Palestinians by the same definition as people who lived there 2 years before the state of Israel was established. So you could say that Israel is a Palestinian state if you're using it in the geographic sense. You could also say that Jordan is a Palestinian state because the state of Jordan was formed out of roughly 75% of the British Mandate of Palestine. The state of Jordan, the country of Jordan, was created out of about 75%. That was the first land for peace swap with the local Arabs in Palestine.
Hmm.
So Gaza, their land in Gaza, their land in the West Bank, these would not be the first Palestinian state given for peace. Jordan was the first, and it didn't work. Then we got Israel, all right? And that's not working for them. You got to be a fool. All right, so the British Mandate of Palestine is the name that mainly the European nations gave to the area that at that time what was called the League of Nations. It's kind of like a precursor to what is now known as the United Nations, right? It's a coalition of many different countries that work together to agree upon certain policies for international relations, for relationships between different countries. So after World War One, the Ottoman Empire, which was an Islamic empire, it was vast, it was huge, and it had lasted, I don't remember the exact amount of years, but roughly 1,000 years it had lasted. This empire included all of the land of Israel, and it basically stretched practically to India, you know, nearly.
Yes.
Um, and it included parts of North Africa. It was huge. This was not a country. This was an empire,
Empire.
a colonial empire, a colony. It was a foreign occupation in the land of Israel, an Islamic occupation. When the Western powers succeeded at dismantling the Ottoman Empire, this Islamic empire, at the end of World War One, you were left with vast stretches of land that had no government. And in these lands, there was no organized sense of a nation for the most part in most of these lands. Okay, there were certain ethnic groups that were indigenous, local to some of these places, but they did not have any actual governance. And most importantly, the non-Jews who lived in the land of Israel at that time, they had never had their own country and had never had their own national identity either up to that point at the end of World War One. So mostly the European nations, but it's the League of Nations, they divided up all this land in the Middle East into major divisions. So they created a division that they called the Mandate for Palestine. All right. And when they used this term Palestine, they meant it in a geographic sense. They did not name it after any ethnic group. There was no ethnic group that was uniquely called Palestinian. Anyone who lived there was called Palestinian. All the Jews who lived there, who many of modern day Israeli Jews are descendants from, they were also called Palestinians. So again, this was not a national term. It's sort of like how you would call any kind of animal that you might discover in South America. If you find a new animal or plant in South America, you might call it the South American lotus or the South American peacock, for example, right? It doesn't mean that this term South America is the name of a certain country. It's the name for a region. That's how the
Yeah.
term Palestine was used at that time, right? But what I really want people to note here is that this modern usage of the term Palestinian that is now appropriated and misused by the Palestinian Islamic terrorist groups, this term was popularized in modern times by foreign powers, by foreign countries, particularly Western European foreign countries. So it's really rich, it's really funny, it's really pathetic and deceptive to use this term that non locals enforced upon us in the land of Israel. They called us Palestinians. And then those who hate Israel, who live in this land, then adopt this and start trying to claim that there was a Palestinian country because you had the British Mandate of Palestine. Well, the British Mandate of Palestine was not a local country. This was a foreign government in the land of Israel. It was foreign. They weren't even Arab. It wasn't even an Arab government. It wasn't a Muslim government. They adopted this term Palestinian from a Anglican Christian Western European power. So it's what's called an exonym. It's a name given to them by foreign powers. And of course the Europeans are used to calling the land of Israel Palestine because they inherited this from the basically from the Roman Empire, which had inherited it from, well, they didn't exactly inherit it. The Roman Empire used it as a way to refer to the region without needing to acknowledge the Jewish people's presence there.
So they're not connected to the Philistines.
There's more that I can add. There's a good bit more than I could add, but I want to go ahead and give you a break. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to take ask you a question. Like, these Palestinians are not connected with the Philistines.
Not in any significant way. And the only thing I would say that they have in common with the Philistines of the Bible is that this term does derive from that term, which, by the way, means in Semitic language, in Hebrew, it means invaders. So it's not a name to be proud of. From its inception, from its beginning, the term Philistine or Palestine, from the beginning, it has been the name of foreign occupation. It has been the name of foreign invasion from the beginning. But yes, they don't have anything uniquely in common with the ancient Philistines. It's very funny that they often try to claim that they are descendants of them. They try to claim that they're descendants of the Phoenicians, the descendants of the Canaanites, the descendants of the Jebusites. Well, they're the descendants of everybody. It's
Yes.
really, when someone makes a claim that's just too good, it's probably too good. It's probably too good to be true. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they do have one thing in common with the ancient Philistines and other pre-Israelite Canaanite cultures, and that is death cults. They practically worship death, as their leaders have admitted on multiple occasions publicly, and I could send you videos of it, where they say that we love death like the Jews love life. And yes, of course, there are Palestinian people, quote unquote Palestinians, who do not worship death. But when I'm speaking about the Palestinians, I'm not talking about the exceptions to the rule. I'm talking about the cultural establishment, the Palestinian establishment, the views and the sentiments that are expressed consistently by mainstream popular Palestinian organizations. That's what I'm referring to when I say Palestinians. So they do have that in common with the ancient Philistines. They have death cults. They proudly are willing to sacrifice their own babies, their own children and wives, if doing so will help make the world hate the Jewish people more. They proudly sacrifice their children as human shields in war, hiding them in buildings when Israel warns in advance. Israel tells them beforehand, we are going to bomb this building because you have put rockets, missiles, bombs inside of a school. Is it a school anymore if you're using the school to store rockets and you're firing rockets from the school, is that still a school? You know, if I take a bathroom and I write the word mosque on it or synagogue on it, does that bathroom magically become a synagogue because I put the word? If I'm using the bathroom in there, no. You can write whatever you want on the building. If you are using it as a military base, the moment you use that school or that hospital or that mosque as a military base and a place from which to fire rockets, that is no longer a school. That's no longer a mosque, and that's no longer a hospital. And
Yeah,
any
yeah.
civilians who might be in there are no longer regular civilians. They are now hostages to you, being used as human shields. And if they die because they were not allowed to evacuate when Israel told them in advance to leave in order to prevent civilians from dying, if they don't evacuate and you have them hidden in there with you because you want them to die so that the numbers of victims of the Israeli bombing will be higher in order to make the world hate Israel more. Well, I'm sorry, but those are not regular civilians. Even if they're innocent, they're not regular civilians. They are victims. They are victims not of Israel, they're inadvertent deaths from Israel's bombs, inadvertent deaths that Israel tried to prevent by warning them to evacuate. But what they are victims of Palestinian leadership's own homicidal sickness, their own death cult, that they want them to die. We cannot see every crevice where they're hiding victims. And if someone comes at you, if someone's coming at you with a machine gun, but they have an infant, they have a baby strapped under their shirt, you know, eh, if 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 you choose to not shoot at that terrorist who's coming at you with a machine gun, right? If he's coming at you with a machine gun, trying to murder you and your whole family, if you don't risk possibly, and it is a travesty, it is a tragedy, if you accidentally kill the baby that's hidden under his jacket, but if you don't take the chance of maybe accidentally killing the infant who is hidden under the terrorist jacket, if you don't take that chance, that risk in order to kill the terrorist, then you're going to be guilty not merely of accidentally killing the baby who the terrorist wants you to kill, but you're also going to be guilty of the deaths of your whole family that you did not protect. So if I have to choose between allowing my entire family die because some terrorist is coming with a machine gun, if I have to choose between letting my family die, choosing for my family and my people to die, over possibly risking accidentally killing an infant who the terrorist is using as a human shield hidden under his jacket. Well, I don't know about you, but it's not a moral question. It's not a moral dilemma. It's clear what you have to do. It's clear. You need to risk possibly accidentally killing civilians who you don't want to kill rather than for sure having your own family killed. It's not even close. There is no moral equivalence. There's no moral equivalence.
How come the common public is not, getting a clash with this Hamas? Because what they're doing is wrong to their public itself. Why the same people, like, I know that there are differences between the Palestinians and the Hamas. They don't like them, but still, why
Hold
would
on,
they
hold on.
allow them?
A lot of Palestinians love Hamas. A lot
Hmm.
of Palestinians who are not Hamas love Hamas. And some of those who do not love Hamas love what Hamas does to Jews. They may not like Hamas because they disagree with some point of Hamas's theology, because Hamas is it's a terrorist religious organization. So there are Palestinians who dislike Hamas. They don't like Hamas not because they kill Jews, and they also kill Palestinians on purpose, but they might dislike Hamas for other reasons. Maybe they feel like Hamas steals too much of the international aid, so they don't like Hamas for that reason. But this is important that people understand. The Palestinian establishment, meaning the mainstream feeling and opinion among Palestinians, is that they love what Hamas does to Jews, even if they don't like Hamas. There are Palestinians who do not support murdering Jewish civilians. There are such Palestinians. They are not the norm. They're not the norm. I'm sad to say.
Hmm.
And we should not be naive. You're welcome to interview or talk to Palestinians on the internet. Put them on the spot. Ask them, are you as opposed? Do you equally oppose intentionally targeting a Jewish civilian to be murdered? Do you oppose that equally as much as you oppose intentionally targeting and killing a Palestinian civilian? I assure you, 9 times out of 10, they will say no. If they will even answer. Of course, usually they know that their answer is no, I don't consider them equal. I would much rather a Jew die. And if they know that they're going to get in trouble saying that, they'll just try to avoid the question. They'll try to change the topic. Most Palestinian, even youth, have been brainwashed from infanthood to believe that the Jewish people are evil. We are Satan in human form. And this is not something that can change just like that. It would take a major effort, not only by Israel but by the entire international community, to help change this ideology. Palestinian identity, as it is currently, not before Israel. Palestinian identity before the state of Israel was clearly distinct from the current Palestinian identity. Current Palestinian identity, it's not a nationality, it's not a race, it's not an ethnicity. These are common lies that people say about Palestinians. They're not a race. They look more or less the same as most Israelis. Most Israelis come from like Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Iraq. Most Israelis look the same race. This is not about racism. It's not about ethnicity. Palestinian identity is first and foremost an ideological identity based upon the desire to delegitimize the existence of a Jewish state, Jewish independence in the Jewish homeland, and eradication, the ethnic cleansing of the Jewish people, removing the Jewish people from the land of Israel, even by genocide if necessary. That is the essence of Palestinian identity. That's what it is. Any Palestinian, quote unquote, who does not agree with that has taken himself out of the Palestinian mainstream, and good for him. Good for him if he's done that. And I would recommend any Palestinian who disagrees with this view, it would probably be in your best interest to stop calling yourself a Palestinian. Now, I'm not going to force you, I can't force you, but I would suggest stop calling yourself a Palestinian. If you truly believe that you are indigenous to that land, why in the world would you want to call yourself Palestinian when that word means the opposite of indigenous? Palestinian means invader. That's what it means. The only possible alternative meaning for the origin of Palestinian that I have seen is as a possible variant translation into Greek of the word Israel, a literal translation of the word Israel from an underlying word in Hebrew that means to struggle. So there's a Greek word that means to struggle or to fight. This sounds similar to Palestinian. So either this word Palestinian means invader, the opposite of being indigenous, or the word Palestinian, alternatively, is an ancient translation from Greek, a literal translation of the word Israel, which comes from the root word to wrestle or to struggle. So either way you cut it, if you are not a homicidal, genocidal, Jew-hating Palestinian, why in the world would you call yourself Palestinian? Maybe call yourself, I don't know, a Levantine. If you don't like the term Levantine from the word Levant, maybe you could call yourself Canaanite. I'm not going to tell you to, but Canaanite would be better than to say Palestinian. Maybe call yourself an Arab of Israel, or you could choose to associate with the Jewish people. You are able to become Jewish. You know, you better believe it that you're going to go through some extra security scrutiny after you've associated with groups that want to murder Jews, but you can become Jewish if you are sincere and make the effort. There are alternatives. A sincere person should not call themselves Palestinian in the current political situation.
So yeah, you nicely said that. What I'm seeing is like from the history of the whole Jewish history. I'm seeing it. It has been targeted against the Jewish people than the land. They wanted to all the time. It has been Jewish people, whether they're inside the land or outside the land. It
Yeah,
is
exactly.
about the Jewish people.
The
Even if
land
you,
is just an excuse.
yeah,
It's just
land
an
is nowhere
excuse.
connected. Yeah, it's an excuse. Even if you leave the land, if you go to Australia or some other island, still they're going to be back you behind you. That's the thing. It's about the Jewish people themselves. It's not about the land piece. It's just
Absolutely.
it's not.
Absolutely. Their
So
hatred for the Jewish people long existed the re-establishment of the state of Israel. And all those Muslims and radical left-wing fools who claim that Jews and Muslims were living in a kumbaya land paradise before the land of Israel, they're either absolute ignoramuses of history or they're being deceptive. There have been short periods of peace between Jews and Muslims, but for the most part, when Muslim communities were not violently threatening the Jewish people or committing massacres, which of course was not every single day, but when they were not massacring the Jewish people, they were systematically and consistently, meaning almost all the time, pretty much all the time, for the last 1,300 something years, oppressing the Jewish people. What I mean by oppressing is, okay, even when they're not murdering Jews, the Muslim society's best behavior toward Jews was that we would allow you to breathe and eat so long as you pay discriminatory extra tax to your Muslim government, very often, even though that government did not protect them. Muslims will often claim that tax you pay as Jews to the Muslim government in order to allow them to protect you. It's payment for protection. Endless examples, historical examples, where
so
even though Jews
yeah.
were paid, they were not protected and they were oppressed. Jews who would build a synagogue without permission would be punished. Jews had to make a synagogue according to certain sizes determined by the Muslim authorities. A Jewish girl in Yemen, even in the last 100 years, I know people personally in Yemen who she, I had a close friend who I helped take care of she and her husband for 2 years. She had to marry when she was about 12 years old because if you did not get married, if you were a Jewish girl and did not marry before the age of 12, the Islamic government would kidnap you from your family and force you to marry a Muslim guy.
This which year, Rabbi? Can you quote the year? Like I should be definitely 19 before 1947, or like what time period? Could you quote that?
What time period? What?
These things happened, like
I'm I'm
Islamic.
I'm speaking all along, not one specific time. From the domination and occupation of the armies of
Islam.
Muhammad, from the inception of Islam until right now, it didn't stop with the state of Israel. All along, Jews have been persecuted and oppressed under Muslims. There is no equal rights. Anytime they cry crocodile tears about apartheid and discrimination in Israel, they are looking at a proverbial speck in the eye of Israel when they have a massive log in their own eye, log of hypocrisy. There is no equal rights for Jews, and it's not only Jews, there's no equal rights for Christians in Arab countries. If you want a Palestine, tell me how many Jews are going to be allowed in that Palestine? Every Palestinian I've heard wants Jews eradicated out of the land of Israel. If you want a Palestine where there will be equal rights for Jews and Arabs and Muslims, I mean that would be an amazing thing. But you need to you need to go complain to Hamas first before you come to Israel. Israel already allows Arabs, Muslims, Christians, atheists equal rights. And of course, there's always going to be discrimination and rudeness between people one on one. You cannot legislate that to disappear. But as far as Israel's laws, there are far more equal rights than in any Islamic country on earth. So if you want a Palestine that has equal rights for Jews, Christians, and Muslims, before you go complaining about Israel, you need to first go talk to the Palestinian establishment and see if they approve of your beautiful idea. See if you even come out alive. Seriously. Like, read the
Y-
charter of Hamas, read their founding document. It's online.
Yeah.
Or just look at the comments under, if we post this video on my on any of my social media sites, just look at the
Hmm.
comments under this video.
Hmm.
It's so absurd to even think that the Palestinian establishment wants peace. They don't want peace. Full stop.
Yeah. So yeah, this is really yeah, I hope as
It's a pipe
President
dream. A pipe. We call that a pipe dream.
President Netanyahu was telling that Hamas started this war and we will finish it. Hope this time they kind of get things done under their control. I mean that's what I pray for that because this has been a long time war.
It's a PR war. It's a PR war if we say that the war is only against Hamas. Because anyone who's familiar with Palestinian society knows that Hamas, although it is the dominant and controlling authority in Gaza, in the Gaza area of Palestinian cities, although Hamas is the dominant uh, terrorist group, it is not the only terrorist group. Practically every single Palestinian political organization is a terrorist group. Every single one. If the Israeli government succeeds to uproot and destroy Hamas, which I hope they do, God willing, it's not going to be enough. You still have Islamic Jihad. You still have the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO. You still have Fatah. All of these, even this very moment, publicly support the murder of Jewish civilians. Yes, sometimes when they go on like Fox News or CNN, they speak from one side of their mouth, but you don't have to look too hard in Arab media or in when they speak Hebrew to Israelis if they speak from the other side. You only have to look at the comments of their supporters. Destroying Hamas will not be enough.
Yeah,
We
I'm
have to
really
destroy,
yeah.
we have to destroy the false narrative of Palestine to begin with. We have to destroy the false narrative of Palestinian identity. You can have a Palestinian identity in the geographic sense, in the sense that also Israelis are Palestinians. Because Israelis are Palestinians in the way that Europe has traditionally used the term Palestine, in a geographic sense, in the sense that both Canada and the United States are North American. Okay, nothing wrong with being Palestinian like that. But we have to destroy the Palestinian nationalist ideological identity, which is founded upon the murder and ethnic cleansing of Jews from the Jewish homeland. Nobody cries about the ethnic cleansing of Jews, the removal of Jews from Gaza or the West Bank. Nobody cries about that. It's just simply a double standard, and that's the definition of Jew hatred. You know, the only
Yeah.
apartheid in the Middle East is with the Palestinians and other Arab governments. And that's the only apartheid in the Middle East.
So this is what it is. Like I'm very sorry for this Islam brothers because you know it when a lot of countries invaded the other countries. British invade the other countries all over.
Absolutely.
Poland, Polish, German, or French, Scottish. Everyone started to grabbing countries on those days.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know,
Yes.
so no one built or took an authority or power to demolish their faith in their capturing lands and establishing their own church or something. No one did that. They
I
wanted to
mean,
do it
I'm sure people would say that there were cases where they did, but without a doubt, no one did it to the degree of
extent of
success,
Islam.
to the extent of Islam. Also, all these foreign powers of Europe, especially, because they love to talk about Europe and the evil white man. And I will be the first to confess that there are evils I mean, the freaking Holocaust happened in Europe, okay, with the joy and support of Palestinian Islamic establishment, by the way. However, the European nations that did all of these things also made, and they still have things they need to correct and can correct. There are still injustices they can correct. However, the European nations have made far, far more effort to correct their ways. They have made, and from within themselves, their local populations put far more pressure on their own European governments in order to make amends, to rectify, to correct the wrongs to the degree that they're able. I mean, you cannot change history, but to hold them accountable. European nations, despite all the terrible things they've done, are light years ahead of the Islamic colonial power, the Arab Islamic colonial power, where they still, with pride, dominate and attempt to destroy openly, shamelessly, native communities. It's not only the Jewish people. You have the Assyrians, the Chaldeans, the Yazidis, the Mandaeans, the Zoroastrians, which are the Parsim. You even have some in India. Why are they in India? They fled. They fled Islamic persecution. They're,
Yeah, I mean,
they're,
yeah, it is not. I'm not even talking about the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Why would they
Mhm.
build the Al-Aqsa Mosque right on the spot? It has been already established place, and why would you do that? And then you now claim that that's where the Muhammad Prophet extended to heavens
Historical
or whatever.
revisionism.
So why
Historical
it
revisionism.
happened in India too, Rabbi. In India
Yeah.
also a lot of temples are destroyed, and they built on top of that. But this the modern day Islam people, they don't know they may not be knowing the real history what happened before, but when they get offended when they were their temples or the
It's
masks are being destroyed. That's kind of a little bit
it's
difficult in
it's
India.
very natural. It's natural, and I don't think it's necessarily bad in and of itself that people, all people, naturally trust those who are closest to them, those who are they're most familiar with. They naturally trust them more than people that they're less familiar with. So I will naturally, having grown up in the United States, and it's not exactly the case now, but my original perspective was to naturally trust what people say in English. If they're from my country, I will trust them more than I will trust someone who speaks Hindi or Arabic or Hebrew, right? This is natural. However, however, when a person does not even know how to read or just barely knows how to read, then you amplify the degree of this blind trust even more. Most European nations, including the United States, we're not the best at it, but most European nations and the United States encourage and celebrate the learning of other languages and learning about other cultures. So even though we have that natural tendency to trust our people who speak our own language more than other people, but we also encourage learning about other cultures, recognizing the value in other cultures, learning other languages, and these are like windows. When you learn another language or get to know people from other countries, these open up windows of understanding so that suddenly you start to realize, oh, there's another perspective that maybe was lacking in my native language. In the Arabic world, in the Islamic world, and they're not the same thing, but there's a ton of crossover, right? Pretty much all Muslims are I'm sorry, pretty much all Arabs are Muslims, but not all Muslims are Arabs. Nearly all Arabs are Muslim. So in the Arabic world, they don't have this value. They do not have this value, and sadly, uh, the idea of literacy in the Arabic world, and of course this varies from country to country, but we're talking about on the whole, for the most part, literacy isn't that high. And even with the literacy that there are different levels of literacy. Being able to read a book that says the cat jumped over the fence, that's not the same literal level of literacy as being able to watch C-SPAN or open up a book of Shakespeare and understand what is being said. A huge amount of of even Palestinians are not even able to read Arabic, written Arabic. I don't know the exact percentage, but I had enough encounters to know that compared to the Western world, there's a. I know how to read Arabic, and I can't even speak Arabic fluently. But
Yalla.
to know how to read Arabic is like so. The Islamic Arabic uh, colonial power, apartheid establishment, which covers pretty much all of North Africa, all the Middle East, except for Israel, which is why they hate it so much, and pretty much all the way to India. This entire empire, an Islamic empire that still basically exists, more or less, it was founded by the sword and murder, slaughter of whoever opposed it. It was founded by the sword. Now it's maintained not so much by the sword, it's maintained mostly by high birth rates and ignorance. High birth rates and ignorance. And there are people in the Arab world who don't want to be ignorant, but that ignorance is maintained by forbidding freedom of speech. Very little freedom of speech and very strong penalties if you criticize your government or Islam. So the entire enterprise of the Islamic world is founded on bad principles, and there are good principles in Islam. I studied Arabic language and culture as my degree in university. Like I very much value it. Plenty would argue that I value it more than I should. But sadly, Islam was not spread in the world and is not maintained in the world by its good values. It's maintained by ignorance and it was founded by the sword. That's the fact. That's
Yeah.
reality. If
Well,
you want to
yeah.
maintain Islam in a free world, they need to learn to make reasonable arguments, have respectful conversations without resorting to murdering babies and raping children and then clapping about it. And then when they get caught on camera, clapping and rejoicing that women's pelvic bones were broken, they were raped so brutally that babies' pelvic bones were broken. This is what they found in the autopsies. Their pelvic bones were broken from the force of the rape.
Wow.
Instead of celebrating this publicly, when you find out that Jews suffered this, but then when the international community condemns it, then you suddenly say, "Oh, this didn't happen. This is a Jewish conspiracy. They faked it." Well, what were you doing celebrating when you first heard about it? So maybe now you think it's fake, which I don't really think most of them think it's fake. They just say that to save face. But even if you think it's fake, why were you celebrating it when you first thought it was true? That's enough to expose the sickness, the moral depravity in the Islamic world. The most important thing I could ever say, I highly value the rituals and traditions and prayers of Judaism, and I think there's a lot of beauty and shared richness and meaning in the religion of Islam and in its prayers. But Muslims need to take to heart, we all do, but especially the Muslim world needs to understand that your prayers to Allah and however pure your understanding of Tawheed, the oneness of God is, that is all excrement. It's khara. It's the unclean rags of a woman on her menstrual cycle before God. It is spit in Allah's face. If you proclaim how wonderful his oneness is, but then you go and you celebrate the death of innocent people, you have made a disgrace to the religion of Allah. You have made a disgrace to the name of Islam. And every single person who turns away from the worship of the true God because they thought you represented it, you are going to be held accountable for every instance of kafira, every instance of disbelief as a consequence of your disgusting rejoicing at injustice, at your delight at the suffering and grotesque mutilation of babies. There's no words for it. The Islamic world, I'm sorry, the Islamic establishment is a disgrace to the name of God, to the name of Allah, and to Islam. It's a disgrace. There are beautiful Muslims who I know personally on the internet, and I have met some in person, who are wonderful people. They will be the first to admit that they do not represent the mainstream in Islam. They don't.
Yeah.
Most Muslims want ISIS, but when it comes to Jews, they would love ISIS to be on the scene. They don't want ISIS in their backyard, but they want Jews dead. It's a
Hmm.
huge problem.
Yeah.
Astaghfirullah. God have
Yeah.
mercy on the world.
Yeah, I can understand your heart, my dear Abai. I really truly empathize with you. I have one last question because this has a multiple parts. Because we talked a
Uh,
lot. This one last question, multiple parts. We can wrap it up. Number one is that I know that after 1947, Israel came in, and before that, the Islam probably they had 1,000 years, 800 years. They had the
in the
land.
mid 600s and 700s were the
So
Islamic invasions into the land of Israel.
even the Islam was established only 8600. The fresh the whole
Correct,
religion was
correct.
extant.
Yes, yes,
So
yes, yes.
probably it came to that area maybe 700. I don't know, from 700 to 2000
If I remember
almost.
correctly, like six between six. I don't want to misquote. Like the mid seventh century, which is like the mid 600s, and I'm sure it came in more than one wave, but the only Arab Islamic political entity that ever existed in the land of Israel by the name Palestine. There is one that existed. It was not its own country, it wasn't a race, it wasn't an ethnicity. But there was a political entity that existed in the land of Israel by the name Philistine in
Yeah,
history before the British.
yeah,
That was
okay,
called Jund Philistine, and it was an Islamic military occupation. And it only covered a small part of the modern day of Israel.
yeah.
So, yeah.
So the question is like, okay, now they had the land for, let's say, approximately 1,000 years. Forget about 1,300 to 1,200.
Yeah, sure.
Approximately, they had the land for 1,300. The question is, how was the land before 1947 invasion, the whole Israel? And they had the land, they could have developed the land, they could have formed the kingdom strongly, they can form the government strongly, they could have not even admitted the British to come in to invade their land. They could have stopped that. They could have defended that one. They
They
would
could have
established
made
the Islam.
Jerusalem the capital. They could have made
Yeah.
Jerusalem the capital. They didn't.
Okay,
Why didn't
yeah,
they make
that
Jerusalem the capital?
why, yeah, that's my question. Why you didn't did you had the land for 1,300 years or 1,000 years? You had it in your hand. Nobody was there. There was no. I mean, there were Jewish people a little bit. They could not able to offend you because they were helpless. They could not do because you were exceeding their numbers. So there's no so they had the land. Why they didn't do that one, number one? And how was the land even then? If they didn't establish anything, how was the country at the time? Was it well known, established, or flourishing? How was it?
And they also clearly were not they were not championing this idea of Palestinian national identity when they were under Islamic governments. They never created this fabricated Palestinian identity, pseudo ethnicity under the Ottoman Empire. They
Hmm.
didn't do it when the Jordanians occupied the land of Israel, which is where we get the area of the West Bank. They were totally fine with the Jordanian government occupying that land. Their only issue is when it's Jews there. So what was the land like? Well, the land was barren, like it says in the prophets. It was not productive. It was a wasteland. There were people who lived there, but sparsely. There were plenty of accounts bearing witness to this. Jerusalem was neglected. What they called Masjid al-Aqsa on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which, by the way, historians dispute that is the actual historical Al-Aqsa that's mentioned in the Quran, but it was neglected. There are plenty of photos and paintings showing it. It was neglected. When they had control there, they never made Jerusalem the capital. But again, to your question, for the most part, the land was unproductive. Unproductive. The Arabs tend to overgraze it. However, even before the state of Israel was re-established by its indigenous people, even before then, the land was beginning to blossom and be productive again, as more and more Jews were able to make their way there in the 20th century, and also some in the 19th century. And this is also the origin of a large percentage of the so called Palestinians. Anyone who lived in the land of Israel, if I remember correctly, about 2 years before the reestablishment of the State of Israel in 1948, anybody who had lived there, was a resident there, at least 2 years before, was given the status by the UN as a Palestinian refugee. Anybody except for Jews. The very post-Israel, meaning after the establishment of Israel, the very UN definition of Palestinian, which was a new definition that they came up with. It's not the same as the way the word was used before Israel was reestablished. The very definition of Palestinian by the UN is anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic. It excludes Jews from that definition. Why? Because if they included Jews, then you would have to recognize that the reestablishment of Israel is part of true Palestinian liberation. Where Israel has sovereignty, that is where the real indigenous people were liberated from colonial powers. But a large percentage of the Palestinians, as they are known today, are actually descendants of migrants from around the Middle East who were migrant workers who made their way to the land of Israel as it was becoming more and more prosperous as a result of Jewish Jewish refugees who were making their way back to their homeland and cultivating the land and investing all their money in the land. And as the Jewish returnees to the land of Israel were developing the land, it began to become more productive. So the economy there started to boom. That drew a lot of Arabs, Muslims, even some non-Arabs, Turks came and settled there in the last 200 years, even before the reestablishment of Israel. And that is why, till this very day, I think it's upwards of half of Palestinian surnames, Palestinian last names, are names of localities outside the land of Israel. These last names tell you where their families originated from. You have last names like Al-Yamani, which would be like the Yemenite, the one from
Yemenite.
Yemen.
Hmm.
Yeah. Or Al-Masri, the Egyptian.
Egyptian. Yeah.
Halabi, the Syrian from the area of Halab around
Hmm.
Aleppo.
Hmm.
They have these still today in their last name. And
Well,
I'm not saying that there were no uh, local Arab Muslims who had been there even before the economic boom. There certainly were some, but there was a massive influx, and the British Empire actually kept a record of the numbers. I don't remember the numbers offhand, but you can find it. I have read it before. They kept a record of the numbers. It was a massive influx. And even though they present themselves to the outside world like they are the Palestinian people, internally they are extremely divided. They're extremely clannish. And they have maintained distinctions among different clans. Uh, so, yeah, there are those who existed before that influx of migrants. But what I'm getting at is that the overwhelming majority of Palestinian Islamists in the land of Israel are not indigenous. They are uh, fairly recent migrants and descendants of migrants. And then another percentage of them are descendants of other migrants who came throughout the centuries and settled there, whether it was from the first Islamic invasion and occupation of Israel. We need to use the words that they misuse. They accuse Israel of apartheid and oppression and colonialism and occupation. And these words have meaning, but they're misapplying them. They accuse Israel exactly of what they do. We need to learn to fight them at their own game. And the difference will be that we're actually standing on historically valid facts, demonstrable facts. Yeah, there was a Palestine before Israel, British Palestine. It was a colonial power, it was not indigenous. And the current Palestinian identity, ideological identity, is just a continuation of the oppressive and now genocidal, anti Semitic, anti Jewish occupation of the land of Israel by foreigners. They are living up to their name. They're living up to the name Paleshet as Pulshim. They are invaders in the land of Israel. If they want to join the indigenous people, the people of Israel, or Samaritans, if you like, if the Palestinians are truly indigenous and care about indigenous rights, why do they hate Hebrew so much? You know, it's okay to speak Arabic, but you would think they'd at least want to learn Hebrew. It's the indigenous language of the land of Israel. Why do they hate the name Israel so much? Why do
Yeah,
they
they
hate
yeah.
real
That,
Palestinian literature? If you're talking about indigenous literature to that land, it's Jewish literature. The Dead Sea Scrolls, the Bible, the Palestinian Talmud is studied by Jews who they hate, not by them. If you want to be Palestinian, be Jewish.
yeah, absolutely. Because yeah, as I said, that they are
It's a joke.
against the Jewish people, not the nation. So
They thrive
um,
on ignorance. They thrive on ignorance and irrational hatred. That's all that
yeah,
they thrive.
what I'm saying is Israel and the Jewish people relationship is like mother and children. You cannot separate a Jewish and Israel like that, because it is productive when Jewish people are there. It is unproductive when Jewish people are not there. It's kind of, it becomes barren sometimes because of their relationship between them. It can only be productive when the Jewish people are inside. That's why I'm seeing. But my last question to you is, when they say about the canon, what were the borders, initial border, those days? What are the borders where it goes up the canon whole when you talk about the canon? Because sometimes some people get
I don't know what you mean by canon. You just
the
mean
land of
borders?
Canaan.
Oh,
You know,
Canaan. Canaan. Canaan.
yeah,
In
Canaan.
English.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Canaan in
Canaan
Hebrew.
or Canaan. Yeah,
Well, these. So,
the
you
initial
know,
borders. I want the initial
it may
borders
be,
when
it
God
may
told them,
be,
"I'm taking you to Canaan."
it may be inconvenient to say this, but this is the reality. This is the fact of the matter. No empire or state or people through most of human history had clearly delineated borders. They had roughly delineated borders. Also, Canaan, when we refer to Canaan, it's being used in reference to a geographic region. Canaan was never a single country or state or even empire, as far as I know. I've never seen any indication of that. Canaan was used kind of as a geographic term as well, similar to the way the term Palestine was used later in history as a geographic term. And there were a people called Canaanim, but later on it became a term to refer to the entirety of that area. So the borders, I can only give you rough borders. There were no hard, clear borders. So the land of Canaan, I think the most conservative definition would probably be roughly the area of modern state of Israel, including the West Bank, which is Judea and Samaria, and the area of Gaza, and all the way up into southern Lebanon. And it pretty much stops in those mountains where Mount Hermon is, in the mountains of Lebanon. That's pretty much where I would say it stops. I don't know an exact. I don't even think they had, because for the most part it was city states at that time. There were no countries like we have modern India and modern United States, where between cities there are no walls. You know, you just drive or walk from between cities. There's no wall with a gate. In those days, they had walls and there were city states. So each city was independent. It might work together with other cities, but they were not a clear country, a unified country like we think of today. And so
So how
what
about the
would
eastern part of it? I understand down south could be Sinai and other thing, but I wanted to know on the,
and
as you said, that in the northern part about the Lebanon border, you said that.
these were
How about
very
the eastern part,
these were
east?
very so these were very by modern standards, these were very unpopulated areas. So there
Yeah,
were people living there, but even when we talk about city states, these cities were not like a city in our modern conception. They were not like cities in India or the United States. By modern terminology, we would probably call these city states villages, tiny little villages.
yeah.
Maybe some of them were moderately sized, but and they probably
Was
also
Jordan included in the Canaan?
I'm sh- I don't so the modern borders of Jordan are a modern creation by Europe with the creation of the Mandate of Palestine. the British mandate of Palestine. But probably, I'm going to guess maybe, but I'm not sure. And the reason I say that is because it seems like in the Torah, it looks like Canaan is really viewed as being on the other side of the Jordan River, on the other side of the Jordan River. And then they gave two of the tribes land. I believe it was Gad and Yosef
Hmm.
or Menashe. They gave them some
Manasseh.
land on the area of what is now Jordan. So large parts of modern day Jordan are a part of ancient Israel. It's actually part
Yeah.
of the land of the Jewish people. But we don't murder them for that. We don't use that as an excuse to murder Jordanian babies, right?
Okay.
But uh, but if you read the Torah carefully, it looks like this was not the area that was called Canaan. If I'm not mistaken, Canaan was basically the area west of the Jordan. The question is going north and south. I think the rough borders were simply as you get into the desert. The more deserty it gets, the less inhabited it is. So it's not that there was a clear border, it's just that no one wanted to live there because you didn't have any grass for your flocks to eat, you know? And when you get up in the mountains, it's too difficult to make cities in the mountains. So there were less people there. It just wasn't relevant. Along the border of the coast, though, with the coast going northward into Phoenicia. So the area of Phoenicia, where the Phoenicians lived, um, sometimes that seems to be considered part of Canaan, and other times it seems to be regarded as its own thing. From what I've read, it looks like it kind of depends on who the historian is that's writing the text you're looking at. I could look into that more, but the area of
But
Phoenicia seems to be kind of the gray area. If you're talking about linguistically, that was the area of Phoenicia, and the Phoenicians, which are basically the area of modern day Lebanon. In my opinion, that would have been considered more or less the same culture because linguistically, ancient Phoenician was essentially the same language as ancient Hebrew. They were just different dialects of the same language. They were mutually intelligible.
Babylon was
Mutually.
not included, right?
Say what?
Babylon was not included, right?
Oh no, 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 no. Possibly parts of it is included in the ancient Promised Land, but the Promised Land is distinct from the land of Canaan.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah,
The
because
Promised Land extends all the way to the Euphrates.
okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, because yeah, sometimes they talk about the Yob, started its journey from Ur. It
Well, there
falls
is
in.
it's possible, and it's there is a statement. I forget which book, but it might be like in I don't want to say which book. I think in Second Samuel or Second Chronicles that King Solomon conquered all the way up to I think it starts with a T. It's a Tepperth or something like this, which is right on the Euphrates, but a very northern area of the Euphrates. This is part of the Euphrates that's in modern day Syria, and it's it, there is evidence, literary evidence. I don't know about archaeological evidence that King Solomon may have conquered land all the way up to there. So a huge part of modern day Syria is also part of the ancient land of Israel, but that's distinct from the land of Canaan. That was from the kingdom of Israel under King Solomon, the son of David.
So, what are the two rivers, well, Tigris and Euphrates, right, which runs over the
Yeah, yeah.
Babylon? Am I right?
Right, right.
Okay. All right.
Yes, sir.
Fantastic, Rabbi. It's been a long time, and we talked a lot, and then after a long time, I'm joining with you, and it is really nice, and I'm really happy for that, and happy to see you,
Happy
and
to see you also, good friend.
yeah, I'm really happy to see you, and I'm praying for you every single day because I know how you go through what you go through. I'm glad that your relatives or your friends are safe, and
It's
then
not just
hope.
about Israel. Israel is like what they call the canary in the gold in the coal mine, in the coal mine. What Israel goes through tends to be a representative of what the world is about to go through or could potentially go through. So Israel, the people of Israel, are basically the potential for the world. You look at Israel and you see what could happen to you, for good or for bad. And in this case, when it comes to Islamic, genocidal, murderous terrorist groups, the world needs to wake up and realize, yeah, whether or not you like the Jewish people, you need to take serious the threat of any kind of religious group. In this case, it happens to be Muslims. They happen to be, and yes, not all Muslims, but clearly the Muslim establishment, for the most part, are totally fine with the slaughter of innocent civilians as long as they are not Muslims. As long as they're not Muslims, they're celebrating it. The Islamic world hated ISIS. For the most part, they did not like ISIS because ISIS was killing Muslims. ISIS would easily say, oh, you as a Muslim disagree with some little tiny point of what we, ISIS, are doing, so we're going to kill you. We're going to treat you like a non believer. The Islamic world, for the most part, hated ISIS. Not because ISIS was murdering Yazidis and Assyrians and other Middle Eastern minorities. Most of the Muslim world hated ISIS because ISIS was murdering Muslims. Okay? But the moment any Islamic regime or organization murders Jews or is murdering some other non-Islamic group, suddenly they're not all that bothered by it, you know.
Hmm.
And that's again, I want to say there are some very brave Muslims who have opposed this and have spoken out, but sadly, you can pretty much count them on two hands. You can count them on two hands, and I do believe in my heart that there are way more than that. But when they don't have the freedom to speak, when they're afraid that they're going to have their own head chopped off for speaking, then you're basically irrelevant. If you don't speak up, if you oppose something, if you see evil in the world, whatever that evil is, if you don't speak up, then the fact that you oppose it is meaningless if you don't do something about it. So, yeah, I do believe that there are many good Muslims who oppose this stuff. But so long as you don't speak up, what value is your opposition? Your opposition doesn't exist outside of your own mind. Unless you're working as a spy. I mean, maybe you could work as a spy. I would encourage any Muslim who is good hearted, decent, and opposes this stuff to try their best to get out of any extremist area. If you're in Gaza, get out of Gaza. If you're in the West Bank, get out of the West Bank. Stop saying you're Palestinian. Say you're of the land of Israel. You don't have to say you're Jewish if you're not. Say I'm not Jewish, but my family had lived in the land of Israel for a long time. There's many options. God does not care about nationalities based on blood and external appearance. God cares about people based on culture and principles. And anyone can join the people of Israel. Anybody can join the people of Israel who wants to. And if you feel that the commandments of Israel are maybe too much for you, you're not really all that interested, but you do oppose terrorism, you can still ally with Israel. You can still learn from us whatever enriches your life and take a stand for truth. You can be a friend of Israel. You have a choice. As God said to the people of Israel, I put before you this day blessing and curse, life and death. Choose life. Choose life. If you stand with Israel, you stand for life. As
Is it
Hamas says, we love death like they, the Jews, love life. We love life.
is it Deuteronomy 28?
I think it actually appears in more than one place. I don't
Okay.
have the exact verse, but I think there may also be it repeated in the book of Joshua as well.
Okay. Yeah.
38 sounds right. It's toward the end of
Yeah.
the book of Deuteronomy. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Rabbi, it's beautiful, wonderful, nice to see you again. And I'm telling you, my heart goes with you. And, hopefully the world hears and whatever we talk, and also hopefully people realize what's happening really in Israel. And
It's
they should
it's
raise their voice,
amen.
hopefully.
Amen.
Yep.
It's very easy for us to be in an echo chamber and only hear what we already believe. I encourage people who hate Israel, hate Jews, to do what I did. Okay? I wasn't
Yeah.
raised Jewish. I learned about Jews by myself. And first I learned from people who hate Jews. And then I learned from Jews and from their books that most of what I was taught is a lie about the Jewish people. And currently, I follow more Arab and Muslim accounts on my social media, then I follow Jewish accounts. So I see both perspectives. If you hate Israel, but you think you're an honest person, then be honest. Subscribe to at least as many accounts in social media that are pro Israel as you subscribe to anti Israel. So you can see both sides. Because I assure you, there is a lot that the Arab Islamic media does not show the average Arab and Muslim person. So they only see one side, and only they can change that. Their Arab channels are not going to change. Only they can change that. They need to
Mm.
choose. It is a choice. They have to choose to look at
Yeah.
both sides and be honest. Learn Hebrew, learn history, stop being a parrot, and certainly stop being suicidal, and murderous. It's disgusting. I,
Yes, I know. I
I
know.
used
Yeah.
to have more fondness for the Islamic world. I knew that there were problems in the Islamic world, but I used to have more fondness until this recent event because, for the most part, when there would be terrorist attacks in Israel, I knew how evil it was, but Israel would not show because they're decent. They don't want to show people's heads hanging off the side of a bus during bus bombs. Israel did not want to show people a little baby's arm detached from the body. In the Islamic world, they show this kind of stuff, okay? So I had pity for the Islamic world. I told myself they just don't know because they never see it. They only see the other side. This time, Israel released a lot of raw footage where you see things that even Hollywood does not show such. Uh, it's
Horrible
just
things.
things that it's hard to say. It's hard to a person sincerely say that this was fake. I mean, there are people filming themselves leaving Gaza. They filmed themselves leaving Gaza, all speaking Arabic and saying disgusting things about Jews, and then they showed themselves literally butchering people. Okay, so this is different from past terrorist attacks where Israel didn't show it. Israel allowed a lot of this stuff to be seen. The Palestinians themselves released this. Many of these videos, Israel was not the ones who released it. Hamas released a lot of this stuff. So before this happened, this last month, I had more pity and sympathy for the Islamic world for their ignorance. They just didn't know. But now there is so much information on the internet, you have to choose. You have to choose to put your head in the sand and not see. You have to be insincere to to not understand what happened. It's all you have to do is use Google Maps, Google Street View. Drop down where you can see streets on Google Maps. Do that in Gaza. You will see that how can Israel blow up a school in a hospital in Gaza if Gaza is a concentration camp? That's one of the arguments they use to make people hate Israel. They claim that Gaza is a concentration camp, the same as Jews were in concentration camps in the Holocaust in Europe. If you really believe that Gaza is a concentration camp of Jews making Gazans die, then how the hell is there a school and a hospital in the concentration camp? You cannot accuse Israel of bombing a hospital if there's no hospital there to begin with. Gaza is not a concentration camp. They had universities there. They have all sorts of restaurants there. They have resorts there. You can do Google Street View and look. There are even Palestinians who do selfies and videos on TikTok from Gaza. You are dishonest if you say that Gaza is a concentration camp. You are dishonest if you're saying that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people. Okay? This is the most disgusting and shameful example of projection. Projection is when you take something that you know is true about yourself and you put the blame on someone else. This is the most disgusting and laughable, absurd example of projection. Everything they accuse of Israel, they literally are doing themselves. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I've watched a lot
I have
of
no
Pierre Morgan.
sympathy. No
You know,
more sympathy.
did you ever watch the Pierre Morgan's shows?
Piers Morgan, I've seen
Yeah,
some clips. I've seen some of it, not a lot.
yeah,
Why?
yeah. I mean, yeah. There are some of the ambassadors come from Palestine, and the way they did talk, and the way they did express, and the way they use abusive
They
words
are
with all the
dishonest.
filter. Yeah,
You
Yeah,
know, I can forgive someone who's never been there and doesn't know how to use a computer. Okay, it's 2023. If you don't know how to use a computer, get someone to show you. Look at Google Maps. Look at what actually Gaza is like. It's not what you think it is.
so
Okay?
does the
But
Google map give the current situation maps, or it is a
it will say on the
previous?
bottom, it will say when it was last updated.
Okay.
But the general claim is that Gaza has always been a concentration camp. They don't claim it's just happening now. They say it's always been a concentration camp. And that's why they're attacking Israel. It's all nonsense. All nonsense. You cannot attack a hospital if that's a concentration camp because you don't have hospitals in concentration camps. You can't take away electricity and water from a concentration camp because you don't give concentration camps electricity and water. These people don't either they don't know what a concentration camp is or they're simply liars.
Hmm.
That's what it is. All right, I
Yeah.
know I could go on and on.
Yeah, I mean, I know I let you speak throughout the night. I don't mind. I don't worry about it at all because maybe just for this episode, we'll just wrap it up. Maybe we can continue to have this talk in the upcoming days. I know your
Be'ezrat
heart.
Hashem.
Yeah, I know your heart. I want to listen to you, the whole thing from you. I can spend days with you, no problem at all. But just for this episode's sake, we can stop here,
Yes,
and
sir.
we can. Yeah, we'll definitely reconnect, Rabbi. Thank you so much. Happy to see you again. And Baruch
Happy to
Hashem,
see you. God bless you. God save us.
Shawato.
Free
Yeah,
Palestine from Hamas and from genocidal ideologies wherever they come from.
yes, sir. Take care.
Am Yisrael Chai.